Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I want to join one of the largest debates that has ever hit the Final Fantasy XIV subreddit, and that is the topic of a jumping potion. If you don't know what a jumping potion is, how would I just read you a quote right out of Gamer Escape's interview with Naoki Yoshida at E3, which will better describe the entire situation and why it is such a big deal in the Final Fantasy XIV sub-communities. Another thing we're debating internally is whether or not to have something like World of Warcraft's jumping potion that would work with both levels and story. The Chinese version actually has something similar to this already. I'm trying to decide if something like this should be timed with 4.0. World of Warcraft would have players pay to jump over and skip levels, and it's something that could be considered for Final Fantasy XIV as well. Of course, this isn't so we can make money off players wanting to skip the content, but there's always been the debate of when we bring in new players, or if an existing player wants to bring in a new player, there's disparity with the level gap between them, especially if the player has gone through all the content and their friend is just starting. It would be such an effort for the new player to catch up. I feel that we might want to bridge that gap and have that available as an option. Whether or not to actually implement that or offer it as a purchasable option still hasn't been decided. We still have some time until 4.0, so we're hoping to gather more feedback from players out there to see what would be the best course of action for handling this. I've talked to a lot of players familiar with World of Warcraft, and some of them have said, well, why didn't you have your jumping potion with 3.0? That is the exact quote regarding a jumping potion. Now, I've made a few notes for myself here, so if you see me looking over at them, apologies. But so let me clarify a few things about the jumping potion from World of Warcraft. It's not actually called a jumping potion. That's just the term that kind of we've given to it. They just call it the level 100 boost, pretty much. So it's a potion that jumps you to max level in preparation for the expansion specifically in this case. You get one either with purchasing World of Warcraft Legion, or you get one by purchasing it separately for a very high price. So it's actually cheaper technically to get it, but it only allows it to be done with a single character. So if you have a druid you want to make level 100, you make it level 100, that's it, your potion's gone. Now, in World of Warcraft, when you use this potion, quite a few things happen. There's quite a few rule sets behind it. For one, like I said, you're jumped up to level 100. You get some gold, 500 if I'm not mistaken. All of your skills that you would have obtained from 1 to 100, regardless of quests, sort of anything that's quest related, and you get strapped with looking for raid ready gear, and you could jump right into looking for raid, which is really, really easy content. And there's a lot of people there. It's hard to kind of discern who knows and who doesn't know what they're doing when you're doing that degree of content. Now, there's other things that can happen there. There's a few other requirements, like if you're level 60 before you use the jumping potion, then your professions will also level with you to, I think professions go up to 700 when you're at level 100, but there's also a ton of little tiny regulations and things that you could keep in mind. But let's go into some of the things that are good about a jumping potion and some of the things that are bad. And yes, there are good things about a jumping potion. We're not just going to bash on the idea right away. I mean, let's be clear, the very entire point of it is if a friend has been away a long time or you're trying to get a new friend in, it can be an effective means of catching them up to you without slogging through the leveling process. Let's be honest, even as fast and as many avenues as Final Fantasy XIV gives you to level, for some people, they're not interested in the story. They don't want to do 2.1 to 2.55. They're not interested in all that. They want to go through the story, get to 50, not have to worry about that little level 46 to 49 block where they can't do anything and they have to do dungeons and whatnot. And they just want to be able to catch up with their friends and enjoy the game with them. So, I'll call that slogging. The second thing is, just so we're clear, this is another requirement for the World of Warcraft one. In World of Warcraft, there's a place called the Proving Grounds where you have to kind of prove that you know how to either DPS, heal, or tank. You can queue up for any one of the three, and your goal is to, whatever the mission is like. I think the healing one is to heal a tank who's, taking aggro and DPSing. There's one where you have to protect enemies, and then the DPS one is just to kill as many enemies as possible without the timer over your head ever wearing off. Every time a wave of enemy comes, you have a time limit with a little bomb notification above your head. You need to get at least silver in the Proving Grounds in order to do heroic level dungeons, which in World of Warcraft is I want to say it's the equivalent of our hard mode. They're slightly harder low-man dungeons. And so you need to do at least this for content that requires very few people, and for those very few people to function properly. At least some level of competency with the role that you selected when you use the jumping potion, because you do have to pick one of the 3 specs when you pick the jumping potion, or one of the 3 kind of specializations, I should call them. And then on top of that, so you need to do that. So if that's a good thing. I'm glad that you need to do the Proving Grounds in order to do at least some of the content. It's unfortunate that literally everything else you don't need the Proving Grounds for. And then the other good thing is it's expensive. It's not something that's cheap to buy. It's not like it's going to be something that's going to be 20 bucks. We're literally talking anywhere from an investment of probably $40 to $100 when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV. So it's not something that's really cheap, and that makes people think about whether or not they really want to do it. So with all those things in mind, those are the good things, but those aren't all great things. So bad things about it. As I was saying before, players can do pretty much all the content other than heroics without the proving grounds. So there's a lot of content that you could jump into and have no idea what you're doing. Final Fantasy XIV, we kind of have that issue as is, where players leveling up aren't necessarily given the right tools to learn their job as is. They're given the Hall of Novice to learn basic concepts, but the efficiency of their job is not really brought in front of them all the way up to level 60. So the proving grounds, don't really solve that issue entirely, especially when you don't need to do them for the majority of content. Final Fantasy XIV also doesn't have proving grounds, so until we have something along those levels, I think it's kind of risky to do this for Final Fantasy XIV. Granted, I will say this, any player that wants to improve will search and use the resources that they find, and regardless of whether you put it in the game or you don't, putting it in the game is the smartest thing, because a lot of times players just take the cues from what their abilities seem to do when they interact with each other, but a player that wants to go above and beyond will do so on their own. They don't need necessarily something in the game to tell them how to do it. If they're interested, they'll go out of their way. That being said, it's still not a great idea. And two, essentially, it's offering an official power level. I mean, that's something that for years people have, even amongst like the normal ways of doing it. I just released a power leveling guide for 1 to 34. It's completely normal. It's a thing that's been going on in MMOs for years, where one player pretty much helps you kill monsters so you can level faster, or does dungeons for you, or that's literally been in MMOs since the beginning of time. You know what I'm saying? That being said, this isn't that. This is literally the equivalent of somebody just taking your account, making it max level, and then handing it back to you. Although you're the one who's watching it happen pretty much the whole time. So there's the question of it's sort of kind of ruling out all the early parts of the game that were there that are meant to be enjoyed, but instead you're just like, that person doesn't care, so here you go, skip it all. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of makes you wonder why even develop this entire world and have this world populated with, story and with monsters and lore, if you're just going to let that person decide, hey, I want to skip all that. Maybe one day I'll be interested and I'll go back and check it out. So that's another bad thing about them. And there are other bad things. So mostly it's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not logistical. It's kind of a strange thing. It's been one of those concepts that even among fair power leveling and skipping content, it's like the thought of somebody picking up a game and then saying, I want to skip all of this part of the game and just go right to the end. That's, just the idea of selling that as a service is just so strange. So let me get into some of my other notes here, some additional notes that I have for Final Fantasy XIV. So first of all, like I was saying, the game is very story focused. So where tons of content is locked behind completing story missions, that pretty much needs to be something that would be fixed with jumping potions, and it'd be something I'd hope they'd fix regardless of whether or not you use the jumping potion. A lot of features just being easier to unlock as you're going through the game, even as a new player, and also, how does this make sense from a lore perspective? The only thing I can think of is after you take the potion, you just log in as your character, and you're where Heidelin is, and there's a floating potion in front of you, and you drink it, and then all of a sudden you find out that you're coming out of the Echo. Like, that was an Echo experience, and then it brings you to the current time. And now all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I just came out of the Echo. Like, that's it. That's the only thing I can imagine them doing. That's probably what they're going to do. And then also on top of that, each one character has all the jobs in the game. So unlike World of Warcraft, where you jump potion the whole character to level 100, this one they'd have to make it so the jump potion only works on one job. And that means that you could buy it theoretically for every job, which is insane to think if you think about it. So what do I think about jumping potions? So I think that it was an inevitability. When an MMO is successful and it's around long enough and it's updated frequently and level caps increase and more content's released, it's only a matter of time before you hit a point where a new player just literally goes, I can't be bothered to do all of that. Which is, again, weird to me, because when you buy a new game, shouldn't you be excited about all the things you get to do? It's just with MMOs, it's not necessarily the same mentality. It's, I have to do all this in order to get to in order to get to the other stuff. And it's mostly because you usually have a friend or you see other people having fun at max level and you want to be a part of that experience. It's fair to me. It just I never understand it where you have this content and you could be not interested in pieces of it. I get that. Like, you're not interested in the story. That's perfectly acceptable. Considering you have to level with the story, I could understand just not wanting to have to deal with that and just want to get to the content that has the most consistency and the highest level of difficulty. But usually leveling up, you get all kinds of great stories to share with your friends, like, oh my god, the first time I did Sunken Temple of Karn, or dude, Aurum Vale. You know, I was level 50 my first time I went in and they put me down to 49. I'm like, why isn't Holy working? You know, stories like that. Just Holy's level 45. Why isn't Benediction working? There we go. Yeah, it's just like stories like that are the stories you get going through a game and not just skipping right to the end. Yes, you get those stories at the end too, but it just cuts down so much of a game that you've just paid to enjoy. I guess the question is, like, were you enjoying it at the early levels? If the answer is no, then you got me there. You got me, backed into a corner. I can't say, oh, well, then I don't understand it anymore, because then I do. So I kind of feel like the jumping potion is an inevitability for Final Fantasy XIV. I don't necessarily agree with it, though. I'm someone who always agrees with when you buy a game, you should at least want to see all the things it has to offer. Not necessarily like all the things. Like, that's like when people say, oh, you have so many things you could do in Final Fantasy XIV. Oh, it's all so great. And I'm like, I don't want to craft. And they're like, you should craft, because until you've done that thing, you can't say there's nothing to do in this game. But it's like, you're basically saying that I need to be interested in things I'm not interested in to enjoy it. And that's going to happen with MMOs, just over time. Not everyone's going to enjoy everything about an MMO, but I'm always, whenever I'm new to an MMO, I like to see everything. And it seems like this potion is not, it's so people don't have to do all that, so friends can catch up quickly, or returning to the game can catch up. It's just, there's so many different dynamics to people that will use a jump potion, people that want to use a jump potion, that it's hard to really nail any one of them down and say it's right or wrong. There's so many different scenarios that come to it. Eventually, Final Fantasy XIV is going to need this. I think that that is a fact. I think that, I don't think level 70 necessarily is where we need the jump potion. I think we can last at least to level 100, right? World of Warcraft, you guys waited to level 100 to do that, and it was a slog for you guys as well. That being said, level 70 is kind of early. Like, I can understand that eventually. I just don't think it's time yet for the jump potion. I mean, let's look at the things that they could do instead. I mean, they could just make the leveling process less tedious. You know, the level 46 to 49 gap in the main story, probably the single most awful part of the leveling process, because you're like, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm level 47. I'm on level 46 quests. And then all of a sudden you're on level 49 quests and you're like, wait, why? Why is this level 49? Oh, I gotta go do dungeons now for 2 levels when I don't even have armory bonus because it's my first character that I'm taking to 50. You know what I mean? Like, there's things like that that just, they don't measure well with me. Maybe Deep Dungeon will help alleviate that. Maybe they'll increase the experience points from 1 to 50 again when 4.0 comes out. But that's a big one. Making sure that that leveling process is smooth. Don't force people to do stuff off on the side when they really just, when they're catching up, they just want to do the story, the line of quests that you've put up for them. They don't want to have to worry about doing random side quests that don't unlock features. They want to go through, catch up to their friend, and play with them. That includes the 2.1 to 2.55 story, by the way. That as a requirement, listen, I'm all for it. It's a story-focused game. I get it. But you know what I also get? I get people that don't care that it's a story-focused game. I get people that want to just catch up. And you know what? 2.1 to 2.55, removal of that with the streamlining of the experience points gained from the main story and the string of quests that come with it, that would probably alleviate a great deal of issues, because that is probably the #1 issue I hear. What? Oh, I just beat 2.0. When can I go to Ishgard? Oh, you got to do 5 more patches worth of content and main story quests and fetch quests and primal fights. And yeah, doing those hard mode primal fights, they're not necessarily challenging because you're going to get a group in the duty finder most likely that's going to mow over them. But it's still part of the experience. Just most people are like, oh my god, it's not done yet. Oh, I'm just getting the 2.2. It's just a pain. It's just, like I said, slogging. So, removal of that. They already said we won't need 3.1 to 3.x, whatever patch it ends on, for 4.0. So that's good, because they already said they're working on some means of just basically adding a synopsis. It's not that quest in 3.3. I know it's something you're thinking. Like, literally a full synopsis of all the events so players can be kind of up to date on what's going on in 4.0. Um, and then just on top of that, just increase experience points for secondary jobs. I mean, here's the thing: this has nothing to do with the initial process of getting 1 to 60, but it is again part of the leveling process. And like I said, a jump potion in Final Fantasy XIV couldn't level everything to 60 all at once. It would very clearly have to pick one job. So there are people out there who may get a job to 60 and go, you know what, I want to jump potion another job to 60. They just might say, oh, you know, I've always wanted to play Summoner, but I'm not leveling it. I don't want to level it at all. So there's going to be people that are buying it. So how do you prevent the need for jumping potions on secondary jobs? Increase the experience points from things that you do on your secondary job. Yes, I know the armory bonus is 100%. Yes, I know you'll probably have rested bonus when you're in the higher levels. Yes, you'll have the 50% bonus from 50 to 60. Yes, they've buffed dungeons. Yes, leaves are okay. Yes, fates are out there. But you know what? Let's think about this. Fates. Northern Thanalin's pretty much the only place anyone really cares about doing fates. Yes, you can find someone court this occasionally, but not on every server. On some servers, people just either hang out at max level, or they just go and do dungeons because they don't want to do fates, or they just do leaves because they don't want to have to worry about, you know, am I going to make it to this fate? Do I have to run here from there and then just pay attention to the map all the time? There's periods why people don't do that stuff. So increase experience gain. You know, maybe increase the armory bonus to some much higher number. Increase the flat EXP gained from dungeons, because that'll be multiplied by whatever the armory bonus is. That is definitely the other thing about preventing a jumping potion. And also, finally, just make your content easier to unlock. I don't think easier to unlock is the right word, because that just makes it sound like you're dumbing everything down. Make it accessible. Make it so that you're not locking so many things behind the main story. And they've gotten better with that. They've gotten a lot better. But they also need to do a better job of pointing out things that are important, more important. They have the blue exclamation mark with the plus quest to let you know it's a new feature. But even I have friggin' those things that unlock new features, and I don't even care what they are, because I don't know what they are, and I don't really need to know, because I didn't have them up till this point. I probably still don't need them. So pointing people to things like having one that's specifically for dungeons, having ones that are for aesthetics, you know, that's a good start. Like now maybe make one that's, you know, blue with a plus, maybe now make one that's I don't know, that's a Q, that's a giant Q, or a giant D, giggity, with a plus mark. You know what I mean? Like, so that way you can say, oh, this is a dungeon quest. This quest giver will unlock a dungeon for me. Not this quest giver will unlock a feature of the game for me. You know, it's too broad. So I think that they're going in the right direction with that one. But ultimately, jumping potion, I won't use one, but it's going to happen. I don't think it needs to happen. I think there are ways to improve your leveling experience in such a way that they're not needed. But ultimately, there will always be people willing to pay for something like a jumping potion. There are people who believe in what it stands for, an ability to catch up. And then there are people who just want to use it to level other jobs or other classes just because they just can't be bothered. All those people want to spend money on the game. And Square Enix is not going to look at that and go, oh, let's not give them this option and not make money off this, when it probably takes us, not all that. It probably takes us more development time to figure out how it will functionally work than it takes to implement it at all. You know what I mean? So ultimately, I don't believe in the jumping potion, but it will happen. I accept that. Let me know what you think about the jumping potion and the idea of it being added to Final Fantasy XIV. Put that in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for all your latest information. And until next time, everyone, thank you for joining me, and, well, take care.